Hi everyone, welcome to WION Live broadcast from New York City. I'm your host, Susan Tefrani. We're going to go straight to Davos, where we have breaking news from there. Demonstrations and protests have erupted. The protests come as President Trump is expected to make his much anticipated speech in Davos at the World Economic Forum. There's also protests by Kurdish outside the U.S. House in Davos. Anti-al-Shara protests are happening. They're calling for the freeing of political prisoners and more, but enough with me. Let's go straight across to our correspondent who's there on the ground, Dharamjot Kaur. She has been reporting live from Davos, Switzerland for us. Dharamjot, what is happening over there? Give us some color.
Well, Susan, it's happening right outside the USA House here in Davos. The World Economic Forum 2026 is still underway. But as you can see behind me, there are hundreds of Kurdish protesters who have gathered here. And these protests are coming just hours after a clash broke out at the Syria-Turkey border as well. And there were also protests in Turkey which were broken up by law enforcement. And these were pro-Kurdish protests that we're talking about. All of this is coming in the hindsight of a lot of anti-sentiment against Syrian leader Ahmad al-Shara and the kind of relationship that they're now establishing with the American authorities, the talks of Israeli normalization. All of that anger and dissent has somehow culminated here on the streets of Davos at WEF 2026. It is also coming at a time where Trump is expected to be here in just a few minutes from now. We do know there's a delay that happened because of a technical snag, but the American president will be addressing the World Economic Forum soon. And in the anticipation of all of that build-up, we've been seeing protests happening over here for a few hours now, and it's only getting even more intense, Susan.
And then, Dharamjot, what is the sentiment on the ground regarding Greenland and President Trump's recent statements? He said we may be in for a surprise and some announcement. It looks like the U.S. president is going to Davos with a plan. But what are people there saying about the Greenland dispute?
Well, there is definitely tension and a bit of anticipation out of a sense of worry over here, Susan, with respect to what kind of statements will come in, because we have seen a build-up in the past couple of days. We've heard from the European leaders who are wanting dialogue and discourse over the so-called ownership and territory of Greenland. And then there's also the American president who's saying that it is non-negotiable with respect to America owning and controlling Greenland. As he says, it is critical to American national security. How much of that holds true? What this really means for transatlantic relationships? And can this have an impact on other economic ties, other trade ties that US and the European Union have been working on for the past year? Will all of that go to waste, or can a deal, can a conversation be worked out between the European leaders and the American president? That is going to be keenly watched in the next few hours over here, Susan. You're right, we are expecting President Trump to make some very, very critical statements. What kind of ramifications will those statements have? That's something we're clearly looking out for over here.
And this is a protest that's happening outside of the U.S. House, and we're hearing it, we're seeing it. The protesters seem to have a lot of color and a lot of words to say. Have you managed to talk to any of them? And are these also protests to President Trump coming as well, or is it just about al-Shara in Syria?
Well, as you mentioned, all of it is linked together, Susan. If I could quickly ask my colleague to pan the camera and show it to you. There's a lot of posters. There's a lot of photographs, as you can see, of al-Shara and the American ambassador to Turkey, Tom Barrack, as well. And there are some words in German and in Kurdish which translate in English to "this is your war." So essentially, the conflict, essentially the change in ties between US and Syria after al-Shara took over, the kind of conversations that are going on between the American administration and the Syrian de facto leadership, all of that is also seeing a backlash over here. Of course, it has a lot to do with the American president finally making his way to Davos for the World Economic Forum. And so clearly these protests are directly linked to his visit here. I have to mention though, Susan, it has been happening for quite a couple of days now, but the number of people who were present yesterday was probably less than half of this. So we are seeing a few hundred people here right now. There were just a few dozen here yesterday. So clearly the momentum is growing. Clearly they have something to say. How much of this really translates into any sort of bilateral conversation? Do people-centric issues and concerns really make it to the World Economic Forum stage? That is something we will have to watch out for.
All right, Dharamjot Kaur, our very own correspondent, bringing us all the latest from Davos. We're going to check back with you. Of course, stay warm and keep us posted. Thank you.